My name is Carrara Finley. Century. Interior designer in Santa Fe. Last Thanksgiving, I walked into my parents' dining room after a 70-hour week. 3 hotel contracts on my desk. And our family art supply store bleeding cash. Dad didn't even look up. You missed the acrylic inventory update. Sawyer swept in, glowing from a $3,000 spa weekend, Mom and Dad's gift. Dad grinned. Tell me where you're listening from, and which line hit hardest. I stood. The chair scraped. Fine. I'll leave. And you can start paying your own bills. I am Keva Hale. Same table. Default ending. Old Town smelled like varnish and hot dust. The shop lights buzzed. The mat cutter hissed through foam like a zipper. I grew up in a loft above the workshop. A narrow ledge with a mattress. A lamp. And a window that stared straight into the rafters. If I leaned out, I could watch frames being glued. Glass being wiped. Customers holding their breath over perfect corners. That was my lullaby. Precision and fumes. We had a tip jar by the register with a joke label. Family, ATM. People laughed when they dropped in quarters. I did not. I emptied my apron into it and heard the coins talk. Be good. Be useful. Be quiet. In the back room. A whiteboard. Someone had written a house policy in thick black lines. Keva equals labor. Savannah equals inspiration. Staff treated it like a bit. I treated it like a contract. If a shipment arrived at dawn, I signed for it. If a frame came back crooked, I fixed it. If a tourist wanted a crash course in archival mounts, I was the voice. Morning started before school. Racks of brushes soaking in cloudy solution. I lined them up by width. Ferrules shining like teeth. I learned the weight of glass, the way other kids learned piano. Thumb here. Lift at the edge. Never drag. Never smear. The rules felt holy. The rules also made me invisible. Savannah floated in with sunlight on her hair, and a new idea for the window. She touched 3 things. Tilted her head. And drifted out to chase a feeling. Customers cooed. Such an eye. Such a gift. I got the step stool and rehung everything to code. The compliments fell through me, like rain through screen. On Saturdays, Dad handed me the ledger. My hands were still small enough to look wrong around columns. I learned margins before I learned mascara. I learned that late fees compound even if you smile. I also learned that love can look a lot like obligation when you do not examine it. When I was 12, Mom announced Savannah's art retreat. 2 weeks out of state. Workshops. Mentors. A glossy brochure with grainy photos of girls holding charcoal and dreams. $12,000. The number rang in my head, like a bell that would not stop. Dad said growth needs fertilizer. He looked at me when he said it. I nodded like soil. That same month, my allowance disappeared into the family ATM. I did not argue. I told myself a story. If I am useful enough, they will see me. If I am good enough, they will choose me. If I make myself light enough, they will finally stop resting their whole world on my back. I kept notes in a spiral I hid under the mattress. How to cut mats without fray. How to rehang a gallery wall in under an hour. How to talk a furious bride out of a refund by fixing the glare with a different glass. I wrote them like spells. Efficiency turned into identity. Identity turned into leash. The loft creaked when I rolled over at night. Beneath me, the printer fans hummed. The shop clock ticked like a metronome for someone else's rhythm. Once, I traced a floor plan for a gallery I would design someday. I penciled in light where shadow lived. I drew a counter just for returns, so no one would cry at the register. I folded the page and told no one. Dreams do not fit on the whiteboard next to your assignment. People like to say we were a team. They meant I was a support beam. Teams share load. Beams carry it. I carried the ladder. The glass. The late night. The early morning. The quiet blame when a thing broke that I never touched. I carried the praise too. But it never stuck to me. It slid off and landed on the nearest narrative. Savannah is the heart. Keva is the hands. Years passed. The pen grooves deepened on the ledger lines. The policy on the board never changed. The family ATM jar grew heavier. Then lighter. Then heavy again. depending on the season and the stories my parents needed to tell themselves about sacrifice. My name became a function. My function became proof that the system worked. I kept waiting for them to erase the board. I kept waiting for someone to say my name, without adding a task. Silence did what it always does. It taught me how to stay. It also taught me how to leave. The night before Thanksgiving, the city outside my apartment was quiet. Neon from the diner across the street bled through my blinds in pink strips. I had 3 concept boards open on my laptop. Hotel clients waiting for revisions by morning. And my phone buzzing on the counter. A text from my father. Don't forget tomorrow's acrylic inventory update. No thank you. No, see you at dinner. Just another task disguised as normalcy. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. When the invoices finished exporting, I opened my banking app out of habit. The scheduled transfer blinked at the top. $3,600. Automatic. Every month. I remembered setting it up 4 years ago. Thinking it would be temporary, just until the business stabilized. It never did. My thumb hovered over the toggle that said, repeat payment. I tapped it off. The silence that followed was louder than any fight we'd ever had. I leaned back in my chair, eyes catching the sketchbook propped open behind the monitor. The paper had yellowed, but the pencil marks were still sharp. 12-year-old me had drawn a gallery with skylights and open walls. Underneath it, in childish handwriting, someday had turned into decades of fixing other people's mistakes. I traced that word with my finger until the graphite smudged. Around 2 a.m. I made tea, and thought about what would happen if I simply stopped showing up. I didn't imagine chaos or begging. I imagined quiet. I imagined waking up without the store in my lungs. The cursor blinked on a new document. Personal budget, 2024. I wrote my name at the top. Not the stores. I listed things that were mine, design contracts. And freelance payments. Savings. And realized how small the list looked, but how solid it felt. The night stretched. And with it, a decision took shape. Not a rebellion. Not revenge. A correction. I wasn't going to announce it. I was going to execute it. When dawn came, I shut the laptop, packed my portfolio, and stood by the window. The city was still half asleep. The kind of stillness that dares you to make a move. I thought about all the years I waited for permission to rest. For praise that never came. For fairness that never arrived. Maybe it wasn't about fairness anymore. Maybe it was about proof. Proof that I could walk away without everything collapsing on top of me. That morning, I promised myself no more rescuing. No, more explaining. By the time I drove toward my parents' house for dinner, the decision was already living under my skin. Every mile was a rehearsal. When my father said the words, he always said work. While your sister enjoys, I wouldn't flinch. I would take him at his word. Fine. I'd think. I will. I'll leave. And you can start paying your own bills. And this time, it wouldn't be a threat. It would be the end of the contract I never signed, but somehow lived by. The morning after Thanksgiving, I woke up before the sun. The air, thin and sharp. Like something had been cut open inside me. The house was quiet. Too quiet. As if my old life had already noticed the absence and didn't know what to do with the silence. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and logged into the store's accounting software for the last time. My name was still there. Administrator K. Hale. I took a screenshot. Then clicked, remove access. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure? Yes. I was sure. The screen blinked. And just like that, I vanished from their system. The place that had consumed my hours. My paychecks. My health. No longer recognized me. Emails flooded in overdue invoices. Supplier statement. Bank reminders. I read them all once. Each subject line a breadcrumb trail to the truth I'd ignored for years. The numbers told their own story, late payments stacked like unpaid apologies. The debt curve, climbing like ivy on the wall. The last email came from my aunt. Jennifer. Subject line, we need to talk. She showed up that afternoon. Wind-chapped and tired. Clutching a manila envelope. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one I'd bought secondhand when I first moved out. She didn't waste time. They forged your name. Keva. He blinked. On what? She slid out a page from the envelope. and my signature looked back at me. Except it wasn't mine. A lease for a limited edition Giclée printer. $40,000. They made you a contingent guarantor, she said. If they default, it hits your credit first. My pulse slowed to something steady. Almost cold. Of course they did. Jennifer hesitated. There's more. The IRS. 100,000 in penalties. False deductions. They're in over their heads. The numbers blurred for a second, then cleared. This wasn't chaos. It was arithmetic finally catching up. Every lie had an interest rate. That night, I opened a blank email. Subject: formal financial separation. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. I wrote the sentences clean. Without rage. Without apology. Effective immediately. I withdraw from all financial involvement with Hale Studio. All accounts, logins, and shared access have been revoked. Do not contact me regarding debts or business matters. I attached proof: the bank notice. Screenshots. The forged lease. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I had explained my whole life. My finger hovered over the send key. For a moment, guilt clawed at the door. The kind of guilt that sounds like your mother's voice saying, "But we're family." Then another voice, my own, quieter but solid, answered, "Love isn't debt. It's choice." I clicked send. The whoosh of the email leaving felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. I shut the laptop, wrapped both hands around my mug, and sat there while the heater hummed. No applause. No thunder. Just calm. For the first time, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. That was the moment I finally understood what letting go meant. Not anger. Not revenge. Just release. The first call came before breakfast. Dad's voice filled my voicemail before I could even pour a cup of coffee. "You think walking out fixes anything? Get back here and straighten the books before we lose everything." I didn't answer. By noon, Mom had left her own message. Soft. Trembly. Weaponized kindness. My back's acting up again. "Honey, I can't lift the boxes without you. Please call." I didn't answer that one either. Savannah tried last. "Hey sis." Her tone breezy. "I've got this new idea. A paint and sip night. Just 10,000 to lock the venue. You're good with numbers. Wire it over. And I'll pay you back with interest." Delete. Every ping of my phone felt like a knock from the past. And I stopped checking altogether. But the guilt, that was harder to silence. Guilt wears familiar shoes. It knows the way back. Logan watched me pace. "You don't owe them the version of you that kept them alive," he said. "You already paid." He was right. He usually was. But part of me still wanted to believe there was some equation where sacrifice equaled love. Where being good would one day mean being seen. 3 days later, I drove by the studio just once. The window displays were half empty. A dull hum behind the glass where the lights should have been bright. The whiteboard was still there. Marker, fading but legible. Keva equals labor, divided by Savannah, equals inspiration. For the first time, I laughed. Not out of joy, out of disbelief that I'd let that be gospel for so long. By the end of the week, suppliers froze. Credit, $18,000 overdue. The public school district canceled its $24,000 contract for art supplies, citing non-compliance. The illusion of success shattered fast, like a pane of glass under tension. That's when I realized the truth behind the whole empire we'd built. It had never been a family business. It was a pyramid, built on my unpaid labor, my overtime, my silence. We love to call that power, financial control, reputation, legacy, but it's just paper armor, the kind that dissolves the second the rain starts. I call it the illusion of power in an empty wallet. The kind of power that only exists as long as someone else is carrying the weight for free. When that carrier steps away, the system collapses under its own vanity. Mom texted a photo of the studio, lights turned off with a caption, "This is what you wanted." I didn't reply, because it wasn't what I wanted. It was what they'd built. Logan set a mug of tea beside me while I worked on my next client proposal. He didn't say a word, just leaned against the counter and existed like peace does quiet. Steady. Unperformed. In the corner of my desk sat the family ATM jar. Empty now. Catching sunlight through the glass. I thought about filling it again. Not with money. With something intangible. Boundaries. Time. Me. For once. The jar was mine. Weeks passed. The calls slowed. But never stopped. Dad's tone shifted from rage to bargaining. From you, owe us to just 1 month of consulting. Keva. Just help us through tax season. I listened once. Start to finish. He sounded small. Mom joined halfway through on speaker. Voice trembling. Your aunt agrees it's temporary. We'll pay you consultant rates once cash flow stabilizes. In the background. Savannah chimed in. You could work remote. Right? A few hours a week. The voices overlapped like static. I didn't raise mine. I just waited for silence. Then I said. No. One word. Soft but absolute. I could hear my heartbeat in it. They fell quiet. Then Dad exhaled the way people do when they realize begging won't work. After everything we've done for you. He said. I didn't answer. Because that was the point. Wasn't it? Everything they'd done was everything I'd built. That night, I sat at my desk and drafted a letter. Formal. Deliberate. Subject line, termination of financial and business involvement. Each line a boundary turned into language. Effective immediately. I revoke access to all shared accounts. Do not contact me regarding business matters. Love isn't one-way labor. At the bottom, this is permanent. I printed it on thick white paper. Slid it into an envelope. And mailed it, certified. The next morning, I felt weightless. Not happy, something deeper. Free. Consequences came fast. Like dominoes finally given permission to fall. The studio closed its doors 3 weeks later. Inventory sold at 60 cents on the dollar. After fees. They cleared. $8,600. Dad took a night shift with FedEx. Scanning packages for $23.50 an hour. Health insurance after 90 days. Mom started painting again. Small watercolors she sold near the rail yards on weekends' doorways. Iquileristras. Desert sunsets. Savannah got a job at a hobby shop. Cutting mats and measuring frames. Her hands shook, the first week. They steadied by the third. Meanwhile, I signed the papers for my new condo downtown. 2 bedrooms. Exposed beams. A balcony that faced the mountains. When I carried the last box inside, Logan knelt on the bare oak floor and opened his hand. A ring. White gold. Turquoise stone he'd sketched himself. He didn't give a speech. He just said, "It's time we build something that's ours." I said yes. Later that night, I unpacked my old sketchbook. The one with the childish handwriting. The word someday scrawled at the bottom. I flipped to a blank page and drew again. New walls. New light. No whiteboard. No ledger. For the first time. The design wasn't for them. It was for me. I didn't destroy them. I stopped being their fuel. And in the quiet that followed, the world didn't end. It just rearranged itself into something honest. Morning light slants across the adobe walls of my new place. It hits the turquoise inlay of the windowsill and scatters across the floorboards like a gentle warning. This is what peace looks like. Don't forget what it cost. I make coffee in silence. No buzzing phone. No guilt waiting in my inbox. Just the hum of the city waking up. 6 months have passed since I mailed that letter. 6 months of breathing without permission. Now I spend my mornings reviewing color palettes for a 5-star resort project, hand-woven rugs from Taos. Reclaimed pine beams. Light that moves like water across the lobby floor. When I present designs, people listen. When I send invoices, they pay. I had almost forgotten what fairness felt like. Sometimes, while choosing fabrics, I think of my parents. Dad, under fluorescent warehouse lights. Scanning packages. Mom painting doorways and sunsets. Her hands stained with color she finally earned for herself. Savannah measuring matting in a hobby shop. Or laughter, quieter. Her edges more human. I don't hate them. I don't miss them. Either. I think of them the way you think of a city you moved away from, grateful for the lessons, unwilling to return. On the shelf above my desk sits the old family ATM jar. Empty. Clean. Sunlight turns it gold at noon. It's proof that sometimes you have to leave something hollow so you can fill yourself. I close my laptop and whisper the words I wish someone had told me years ago. They taught me endurance. I taught myself escape. Love isn't obligation. It's direction. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for people who refuse to grow is to stop cushioning their fall. If this story hit home, tell me the one family rule you refuse to live under. Maybe your words will be the permission someone else needs.